without much ado then, we bring forward our keynote speaker for the day. A brief introduction about Anand. I had a little more, but he cut out most of it. Anand Deshpande is the founder, chairman, and MD of Persistent Systems. Of course, that does not need introduction. A company that he founded in 1990. Anand has a BTech in Computer Science and Engineering and is a distinguished alumni from IIT Kharagpur. Also a distinguished alumni from Indiana University, where he procured his master's and PhD in computer science. Anand has actively participated in program committees of many prestigious international conferences, including VLDB 2016. He was telling me earlier that you would be interested in this 42nd international conference on very large databases, where he's going to be speaking. It's happening in Delhi between 5th to 9th September. Anand also serves as the Dean's Advisory Council of the School of Informatics at Indiana University currently, and is very passionate about a non-profit organization called De Asra Foundation, which is focused on building an ecosystem for job creators. Let's welcome Anand on stage with a huge round of applause, please. Thank you.
So good morning, all of you, and really it's a pleasure to be here. As was pointed out, I think the 2013 event was held in the COEP auditorium. It was a large auditorium with very few people, and we had a whole bunch of technical problems in trying to get international speakers to come in. So this time I think we are doing a lot better here. We have people who are local and we know what we are doing, I guess. So it's much easier to be here today. And it's a real pleasure to talk to you all. When I was asked to speak here about, in the testing in the context of DevOps, I thought, I'm really not going to talk about DevOps as much as I'm going to try to set the context of why DevOps is important and why, as a test engineer, you should care about DevOps. So really, that's what I'm going to focus on. And as somebody who is not really involved in day-to-day testing activities, but as someone running the business and being part of the sales process in some sense. As was mentioned, you hear DevOps all the time. And what exactly is happening there and what are the changes and all of that stuff. So I'm going to spend a few minutes in that. And hopefully if we get some time, we'll have some Q&A at the end. So this is really the summary of what I'm going to share first, and then I'll go through the specific items on what exactly we want to talk about. So what has happened in the last few years is that there are a large number of what are being referred to as born digital companies. These are the Facebooks or Twitter and a whole bunch of companies like that. They are starting to really disrupt business models, businesses, and innovation across the whole world, and are putting pressure not just on themselves and other born in the digital companies, but enterprises also are being pushed by the methods, the business model changes, and all of those kinds of things. So really, if you have to move at that pace, what do I do? Well, people are using DevOps in those companies, so why are they using it, what has worked, and how can it be relevant to other companies? So that's really the context. And I'll talk a little bit about how DevOps is happening and why this continuous sex, we'll talk about that in a minute, starting to become very important, and that's driving efficiency. And I think one of the points that was mentioned by Sundar, specifically that you are trying to look at some provocative ideas. One thought that I would like you to think about, and I'm going to give you the problem statement and leave it to you, is that in general, it's going to be tough because effort required for the same work is actually shrinking. And we can talk about that and what the implications of that are to the industry as such. The third part I want to say is that, yeah, my future is being best served by being part of the DevOps community. But if I've been a tester all my life, what do I need to do to be part of this community? And then finally, in my opinion, you have no choice. You're here anyway. So you might as well adopt it rather than fight it, okay? So that's really the summary of what I want to say today. So this is the complete summary of what I'm going to say. I thought it'd be best to start with the conclusion first, or the summary first, and then give you a thing so that you know when I'm going to end, okay? As I said, the first thing you would notice is that these companies that are typically born in the cloud companies are starting to become real disruptors in the market. Actually, what I have been looking at, I'll tell you more about this. I have been trying to look at companies in three very specific classifications. So there are these companies that are born in the cloud companies. These are the new 2008 plus companies, those who were sort of fully cloud and always cloud kind of companies. So there's a whole bunch of them. And if you're tracking this whole unicorn race that people talk a lot about, where there are thousands of, well, not thousands, but several hundred, 300-400 companies that are $1 billion market cap, all of these are all these new sort of born digital or born in the cloud companies. Then there is a generation of companies that started after 94, 95, before the born in the cloud companies. These would be the internet companies. And then there are the companies that started before internet, that's the pre-94 companies. And if you look at the fortunes of companies in the market and the discussions going on, market caps, everything else with the three categories, you will find very distinct behavior between all of these three companies. And if you look at the troubles on the pre-internet companies, I don't want to name the companies, but it's quite obvious. And if you read the newspaper, there are lots of news items of how they are under a lot of pressure. And the kind of pressure that they are under is partly because companies like these born in the cloud or born digital companies are really putting a lot of pressure, not just on saying that they have something new that they are doing, so why should a bank care about some of these newer companies, because I'm a bank and I'm going to remain a bank. Unfortunately, that is not the case anymore. And all of these companies who are sort of software companies are actually going after traditional businesses. So these are not anymore software companies trying to do software for the sake of software. So Facebook, you might say, well, it's a new thing and it doesn't matter. But today that's not the case when you look at something like an Airbnb, for example, which is completely disrupting the hotel industry, or a Uber, which is trying to disrupt a very traditional taxi business. Now, if you look at what's happening in these kinds of businesses and what exactly are they doing to disrupt the market, you will find that they are basically focused on three specific things, and there's some examples of this here. One, of course, is the fact that they are all trying to change the experience of how the customers are interacting with these businesses. So the experience is an important part of what people are looking at. So when somebody goes to a Uber, they are comparing Uber experience as compared to a regular taxi experience. Or when they are going into an Apple store, they say, well, the experience that they had in an Apple store feels very different from some other retail store. So the experience part of what is really that customers are looking for has become very interesting and significant. And even when you look at Airbnb, a lot of times when you're looking for, especially on vacations, it's really good to not have to stay in a hotel but still have facilities which are very reasonable, you can get to them and all of that stuff. The second part of what we see a lot because of these companies, the pressure that is coming in, is to do with the fact that they are trying out various new business model disruptions. So it's no more about just doing things the way they have been done, but people are really questioning, what are you really charging for? What are the core assets that you really need to own, and what things can you really open it out for people at large? So a lot of different kinds of business models in that case. And then the whole concept around personalization. So people are not anymore interested in just building web portals and websites or any of those things. More and more when you look at hospitals, retail stores, everyone's saying, you know who I am. Why aren't you taking that into account when you're trying to talk about this stuff? So all of these things are putting a lot of pressure on these sort of traditional companies who are under a lot of pressure because they are going to get disrupted if they don't manage to deal with this changing environment that they are participating in. Now, when you're looking at an environment like this, and you look at companies like Airbnb or Amazon, or for that matter, Tesla, how are you going to be, if the business is moving at the pace at which it is moving, what do these engineering companies do to run their business processes or run their engineering teams? And what seems to be quite clear from various observations or looking at companies, most of these companies are focusing a lot on very rapid deployment, integration, and all of those things, which is really what DevOps is coming in from. So the way DevOps happened in some senses is partly a business requirement from the born digital companies. They all were forced to look at ways to get moving really quickly. And as they started to do that, all of a sudden they realized that they're able to get significant improvement. And that's what this is all about. So as I said, innovation, business model disruptions, and the speed of business are really putting a lot of pressure from the born in the cloud or born digital companies on traditional businesses. So DevOps is no more restricted to only those companies that may be considered the born digital companies. Why do I care about, I work in a bank, I don't need to worry about DevOps. Sorry, that's unfortunately not the case anymore, because your bank, if it does not adopt the speed of operations and the ability to respond very quickly, the bank may not remain a bank anymore and may be something else. So there's a lot of pressure for everyone to not ignore this trend but be very much part of it. And obvious situation is that, as they say, 52% of the Fortune 500 companies have merged or been acquired since 2000. So in the last 15 years, what was Fortune 500 in 15 years back, 52% of these companies have gone and do not exist anymore. And some of these logos that I have here are fairly well-known logos that do not exist anymore. And that's happening in our industry as well. And so then, businesses must transform. That's a business problem, not just a technology problem. Businesses have to transform. And if they are transforming, what does engineering do to keep pace with that transformation? That's really the main purpose of this. So if somebody tells you I'm trying to do DevOps and all of that stuff, it's not just because the guy's gone nuts and he thinks it's a great idea to keep rocking the boat every week or do some new stuff every week or every day. It's more because the business is going to demand that. You really need it because the business is moving as fast as it needs to, and if you don't do this, you may not survive in a sense. So the whole point was that traditionally when what happens, and we've seen this across having worked in the industry long enough, that there is a cycle that we all follow when it means developing, coding, building, planning, all of those kinds of things. And in traditional businesses, we have different teams who are working on different aspects of the build, dev, test cycle in some sense, and the ops cycle. So there are 4 or 5 parts of this cycle. Each of them are different teams. They run in different locations. They are all over the world. Hundreds of people are involved in this kind of a process, and then say, okay, if I have to do all of these things very quickly, how do I go about doing this continually? Do I need to have this cycle be step by step? So, okay, I do this first, and then I'm done with it, and check off, hand off, then the next one, and so on. If this whole process of taking a business suggestion or an idea to implementation is going to take months, years, then business may not be around. So how do I get to a point where marketing decides that, oh, let me try this experiment out, and the next day I'm able to put it right into production so that I can get it going? And that's really what some of the companies on the cloud have done, and that's how they have evolved their business model. So nobody comes with the right business model on day one, but you have to evolve it. And the pace at which they have done it has really made them very successful. And clearly the banks and everyone else are trying to say, can I do that with my engineering? Can I do that with that? And is IT going to be my bottleneck to get to that point that I need to get to? Is testing going to be the reason why I cannot ship my product? Because the testers say, well, sorry, I just need to have 6 weeks of code freeze, and then I'm going to run the test cycles for 6 weeks, and don't come to me before that, and I am certified, whatever the heck it is, so you have to give me 6 weeks. Unfortunately, you can say that, but if you said that, you may not have a job next time. So that's really the challenge you have. So people are looking at continuous testing, continuous delivery, continuous integration, continuous monitoring. So if you look at what's happening in the DevOps context, it's about doing things continually. You're doing all of these things continuously and at the same time. So that's really what this whole continuous X that I was referring to was about. And so really what has happened is that because of the ability to respond and continuously keep doing development, testing, QA, integration, all of those things, people have been able to get phenomenal performance. So companies who have embraced DevOps deploy code 30 times more frequently with 200 times shorter lead time. So it's not just, if I do 4 cycles, now I do 8. It's if I do 4 cycles, I'm going to do 120 cycles. Okay, so essentially, people are deploying very frequently on production right away. Okay, and service delivery on cloud is a continuous process, and it's delivering change as we speak on an ongoing basis. It is claimed that Amazon puts new code on their production side every 11 seconds. Okay, so it's completely crazy, but that's really how fast they are moving. Okay, so if they want to make a change very quickly, they are able to get it all the way down into production, right? And this is sort of from other data that I could collect from the sort of the newer companies, the digital companies typically, that Facebook pushes a release twice every day. Google has more than 100 million test cases executed every day. Etsy does 50 to 60 production pushes every day. Okay, and LinkedIn transformed feature release time from 1 month to multiple times in a day. Okay, so if you have to do this at that pace, what does it take to do it, right? And this is a belief that by 2016, 25% of the 2,000 global IT companies will adopt DevOps. I don't know really how far they will go, but everyone is talking DevOps. So DevOps is no more a phenomenon restricted to only those who are born digital companies. If I am a born digital company, of course, I'm already using DevOps. But if you are a traditional bank, a retail company, whatever business you may be, it's something you cannot ignore. Your business is going to demand that you deliver releases at a pace that if you did it the traditional way, you cannot make it. It's as simple as that. So that's really what's happening, and that's why this is kind of important. And it's expected that the DevOps adoption will be increased 66% from 6%. Anyway, these numbers are all fine, but I do believe that this is going to happen very fast. Now, if you think about it, what is really happening because of DevOps and the fact that they are able to do some of these things and the fact that they're releasing some things? I also found data around companies that are doing DevOps and the speed at which they are executing all this stuff. And the ability to do that has actually made this very sort of significant change in our industry. That's something that as being part of it, I think about it a lot. The effort required for the same work is actually going down. Okay, just think about this. This has major implications in terms of what's happening in the world. So essentially, we were using, say, bullock carts to farm something. Now there's a tractor in the mix. Okay, so it just requires less effort to do the same work. Drawing it another way, if you were to do things in a traditional way, if it were, typically most of us think about effort, and effort is usually, okay, team size multiplied by, number of people on the project. So typically, whatever you were doing in a traditional way, today you can do it with 1/3 or half of the people that are necessary for the same thing in half the time. So the effort actually becomes 1/4 of what it used to be. Now, in the industry that we are in here in India, a lot of our business depends on effort because we are all billing on effort. Now, if the effort goes down to 25% of what it used to be, it has serious implications on how we as an industry function. And that's something that I'd like people at large to reflect on, because this is quite real, and if this happens the way it sees, it's quite scary. Now, one sort of implication of this is that if the effort required is 1/4 for doing the same work, I don't need as many people to do the job. I don't need to spend as much on the same job. And people are talking about speed at which they want to operate. You would have heard this whole thing about 2 pizza teams. I'm sure you've heard this term all over the place. This is what the born digital companies say, that they believe that the entire team should be small enough that they can feed their team in 2 pizzas. That's really what this means. I know people like me who can eat a whole pizza, okay, but that's a different problem. So the idea is that, okay, maybe it's a snack, but the idea is that it's a small team. You don't have too many people on their team, so everybody is there, they're working together and furiously getting this to happen. So this whole concept of offshoring and outsourcing was all based on the implication that there's a lot of work to be done. And if you're doing a $10 million project, you outsource some of it, you can do it for $3 million. Now, if the project itself is $250,000 and you outsource 1/4 of it or 1/3 of it, it's like, is it really worth it, right? So this whole thing about, what exactly is the business model is going to be like, and what is the role for testing? If I don't do testing as something separate and as part of the pizza team, and you are a tester on that pizza team, what does that really mean, right? Meaning, how do you play along with it? And if you said, well, I'm a selenium expert and that's all I do, and there are 2 pizzas on it, it's really tough because you may have to do many things because there is not so many people who are doing just selenium anymore. And the way you may have looked at certain things and said, no, I'm a manual automation guy and I have to ship every 11 seconds and you need to look at me before I ship. There is no time to blink. Where are you going to write the manual testing to happen? So really the pace at which these things are happening is really phenomenal. And what does this mean to the industry is a big question that I worry about. And I think this is something that we all need to reflect on. 2 sets of things that I think we should be thinking about. One is, if the work is actually going to, the effort required for the same work is going to shrink, and if you are based your business models on effort, then there's just less going around. The second part of the problem, which is kind of interesting, is that even though the effort is going down, the work and the budget is not necessarily going down. You can do it more efficiently, but the work itself has stayed the same. In some cases, it's growing. The IT budgets are not really shrinking. People are talking about healthy growth on the IT budgets. But I don't need so many people to do the same job. That's the fact of life. Now, it has serious implications for people who sort of believe that, I'm going to be in this industry for the rest of my life and I'm going to do the same thing. Because now teams are smaller. If I have a 12 people, 15 people team that is entirely responsible for the product, by product I mean dev, test, QA, ops as well, okay, not just dev and test, and dev, test, ops as well. Everyone is doing dev, everyone is doing ops, everyone is doing QA. People need to be multi-skilled and be able to handle these changes that are happening, because if you can't handle this, then if you say I'm a specialist QA guy who works in India from this period to that period and the project is somewhere else or whatever else, then the traditional models of how we have worked, where we have thrown things across the wall to QA, where QA did something and then came back, that's kind of going away in some sense, right? So really, this is a serious challenge and something that we should all be concerned about or thinking about, and I'm sure during the rest of the day, I'm sure you will think about this and figure out a way for all of us to make that happen. So like as I said, as a tester, this is going to happen. So it's not that you can fight this, to be very honest with you, okay? You have no choice. This is happening. And if this is going to happen, your option is, how do I figure out what will I continue to do in the future in the context that the world around me has changed? That's really what your choice is. You cannot change the world. It's already changing. It's already happening the way I said, and there's enough around it to think about it. So what can I do? So when we talk about DevOps traditionally, it's not just about a technology or one thing or whatever. It's a cultural mind shift change in a sense. You have to believe that what you are doing is different. What does it mean to do this whole thing? And typically, if you look at this, and I don't want to spend too much time on what is DevOps and everything else, more about it during the day. But essentially, it's about culture, figuring out automation, how do you do lean measurements and sharings. That's what people talk about a lot, about the terms of DevOps. Okay? But really, this is something that, yeah. Okay. These slides are not moving. Sorry, man. I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, I'll go through this quickly. So this was the 2 pieces. Well, I think it's a focus. Just 1 minute. Okay. So this was the 2 pizza team that I was talking about, where there are 2 pizzas and that's all there is to it. And then what is DevOps? What does this mean to DevOps? And thankfully, work and budget is not shrinking. And essentially, there is a lot to do actually. That's what I was mentioning there. I do have some slides, so I'm going to walk you through them.
Okay. Just one second. Just make sure I'm not focused. Said when people talk about DevOps, they're really referring to this comms as being the DevOps term. And that's really what it means: culture, automation, lean, measurement, and sharing. Okay. And I already saw some of this coming up in the introduction that was mentioned about sharing, measurement, lean, and all of that stuff. And I'm sure this will get discussed during the rest of the day today. So one of the things that I have observed, and this is something that we've been looking at, is that when you're looking at the kind of stuff that you want to do with two pizza teams, there is usually a requirement that people say that you need to be a full stack developer. So you should be aware of all aspects of it. You are a 12 people team, 10 people team, 8 people team. Everyone is responsible for dev, test, QA, support, maintenance, ops, everything that is there, right? Including running the business. So you really need to know many things. So what should you focus on? So there's a stack that we look at usually. So there's an OS infrastructure at the bottom of the layer, then there's a data infrastructure in the middle where the app frameworks, mobility, and then some fundamentals and processing tools. And then we have kind of gone ahead and said, okay, in each of these areas, what are the products that people are using, mainly the open source side? And can you category-wise pick one or two products that you might be really good at? And even if you said you are doing only testing, it's not enough to just say I do testing, because you need to be part of a team where some other day you may have to run the operations, or you may be asked to fix something. So you need to have a pretty good understanding of what's going on. And as a test person, you cannot just say I do only manual testing. Okay, that kind of is gone, right? So that's really why it's become very important for all of you and all of us actually to stay abreast with what's happening. And the need to learn more has actually gone up dramatically in the last few years with this short teams, small teams, and DevOps being an important one. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things. I'm going to skip this. I'm going to come to the last slide here, and then, I don't know, the colors are really horrible there, but let's see. Okay, so I don't know if it can be read at all, but let me just sort of read here and then I'll walk you through this. Okay. So, basically what is happening is that this division between us and them, right, which was something that testers sort of prided on, that I'm a test person and somebody has to throw it across to me, that is kind of blurring out completely. So you cannot separate that out, and you really need to look at us and them as one team, and we are all together, and we have to do what it takes to ship and sell, get the products out very quickly. Second is, again, manual testing is kind of dead actually. There is no room for manual testing in this kind of a world anymore. And actually, why is that the case? Because your customers are testing for you. The manual testing is happening on the customer side. You're looking at the feedback that you get from the website directly or from your output. And if you don't like it, you just change it immediately. So, you don't need to do manual testing anymore. Then the expand the scope of the experience-based testing. There's a lot of emphasis on experience-based testing. So really most of the companies are selling an experience as the main thing that they are selling. So if you're selling an experience, then the test has to be in the context of the experience, not in terms of the artifacts. And that's really what you want to focus on, behavior and all that kind of stuff. And it's all about automation. If I have to ship and release so frequently, I really need to be automated like that. And the last thing is, it's all about speed, right? It's speed about everything else. So really, that's what is driving around this stuff. So let me conclude here by saying that clearly this topic is an important one. Agile and DevOps is really where the world is moving. Not just testing, the world is moving in that direction. And as a test community, I think, and other communities in India and in general all over the world, we need to be aware of what changes this is going to create for us as a business and as a community, and we need to find a way to make sure that we are ready to respond to these changing environments. Okay. So I'm going to stop here, and if the organizers want us to do a Q&A, we will, otherwise I'm done.
Just time for one or two questions.
Okay, whatever, whenever you say you're done. Okay, thanks a lot.
Any questions?
Yeah.
What do you think are the anti-patterns? And given that there is a lot of DevOps and Agile and everybody's talking about it, there is also a lot of abuse that happens under these. Do you think that there is a clear distinction between what is good implementation of DevOps and Agile versus what is bad implementation of DevOps?
So the question is there set pattern on what is good DevOps and what's bad DevOps? Right? I'm going to give you a Zen answer. So it doesn't matter really. Finally, what is good and bad? Who decides what good is and what bad is? Right? Finally, it's about getting results. Okay, so that's really what matters. So I think what you need to think about, and that's really what the message is here is, experiment, try it out. What works for you is the right thing to do. If it doesn't work, don't do it. Break it, change it quickly, right? It's not about reading 5 books and saying, this is the pattern that I'm going to follow. If it doesn't work in your context, it's useless. Okay? So, that's the stage which we are at. Perhaps maybe after 5 years or so, when everyone figures it out and they really say, this is it and all that stuff, people will write books and some of you will write those books, which is all fine. But then something else would have happened by then.
You talked about pre-internet company and modern cloud company. But those pre-internet companies, the organizations have already been built. Right? But DevOps is there, and it needs to be addressed. There are people working on the ground. There's a big challenge on skills and transformation.
Yes.
It's a huge gap.
Yes.
How do you think that needs to be done?
Okay, so let me comment first on the fact, and I didn't really mention the names of the companies, but if you look at, and it's very easy, go through the top software companies in the world who are all pre-internet companies. And if you look at the news items, we've had HP that got split, Dell acquired EMC, EMC went private, so you can go through the names of the companies. All of them are pre-internet. They are all basically stored. Okay. And the reason is that their processes and methodologies, not just for development, the entire process is an order of magnitude worse than the internet companies. It is an order of magnitude worse than the bondage companies. There's a 2 orders of magnitude jump that all these companies have. And they're getting screwed badly. Some of them will survive, some won't. It's as dramatic as that. Right? And the fact is, it's absolutely right. It's because people in these companies tend to resist. It's not about the business model, it's also about individuals in the companies. And people don't make the change as fast as they should. Consequence of that is, if you want to survive, you have to get rid of people who don't change. And unfortunately, there is nothing for them to do. And here's something I want to share with you. This is something that, this is again, you guys said this is an open conference, so let me ask you this question, okay? Here's my opinion, okay? So if you look at the IT industry and you look at the biggest growth that happened in the IT industry, when was that? 98 to 2002. Thousands of people got hired. Who got hired? Anybody who could walk and talk. How old were they? 22, 23. How old are they now? They are all 40. What have they done in the last 15 years to stay upgraded? Very little. They have all become managers, middlemen. If I have a 12 people team, how many managers am I going to have? 0. What do these managers have skills at? And this, I've been quoted on this, and I will say this. All they do is forward mails. There are no jobs for them. Many of them must be in startups right now. They're going to fail too. The point is, skills have to move. Skills are moving really fast. If you don't move, you are history. You have EMIs, you have houses, you have families. Sorry, that doesn't work for you if you are not up to it. And companies are going to go down. if they don't move fast enough. Okay? Now I'm telling you about software companies. This is going to happen to banks. This is going to happen to retail stores. This is going to happen to hospitals. Every single industry is going to get disrupted by software. Tesla is the hottest software company, or is it the hottest auto company? It's not clear right now. What is the difference between auto companies and software companies? So all of us are going to, we have to think about this hard, because if we don't move, we have history. History is bad, worse than history, because we won't have work to do. We have to pay our bills. So it's a real serious problem, and I'm glad that you guys are thinking about it. With this, I'm going to end. Thank you very much.